Good evening, everyone. It's April 5th, 2016, and two things of import have happened today. The first is that the Red Sox opened their season and won their first game, 6-2. Go Sox. The second is that the town of Chelmsford held its annual spring town election, and we're here to give you live coverage and live results. And with me is the inestimable Glenn Thorne.
I'm going to have to look that up after we talk tonight.
Welcome back, Glenn.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you for the invitation to be here.
Great to have you again. This has been an interesting election because of, as much as anything, of the weather. We had this late season snowstorm yesterday. Left the whole place covered and pretty cold this morning, cold and windy, and I'm guessing that might have had something to do with the turnout.
It might have. It reminds me of an election a long time ago when they actually had to cancel the election. You remember that one?
I do.
We were out there holding signs and they had to redo the election 2 weeks later. That was a real chore.
Right, and according to town clerk, the town clerk here, the turnout has been about 10% today. Obviously, we'd like it to be a little bit higher than that. Glenn and I voted, so we're in the clear here. But it is, weather, and also it is not one of the most hotly contested election seasons that we've had here in town. There are a couple of contested elections, and we'll get to those in a minute. But the general landscape has been one of relative calm, relative quiet. Punctuated, I have to say, by a couple of announcements some months ago of incumbents probably sure to be reelected who opted not to run again. And on the Board of Selectmen, that was Matt Hansen and Janet Askenberg, two of the big players out of the five.
And that was partly a surprise. I thought Matt would run again. You know, I didn't know what Janet's plans were, so I mean that was partly a surprise. But it's good to have new people on the boards or people that have been there and come back. To add some continuity, but change is good. So as long as you have people who are willing to put in the time and can dedicate the time to the office, I think that's a great thing for the town. And we have so many people in town that are willing to do that and anxious to do that. And now we have an uncontested school committee race because somebody I know decided she needed a year off after 18 consecutive years.
We're not going to mention any names.
But it turns out that the two candidates, one incumbent and John Moses, who have had a chance to meet, both very, very dedicated to the town. Barbara Scar's been around for a long time, and John is new, but he certainly has the energy and he has the intelligence.
That's right. And to your point about the selflessness of the people who run for these town offices, it's absolutely true that when I tell people about how well run a town Chelmsford is, it really is, as much as I like Paul Cohen, it's more about how we find all of these people to fill all of these positions and do such a great job. Great people doing a great job fulfilling those obligations.
And it really makes you feel good to be able to go out and tell people where you work and people that you know what happens in Chelmsford, because it's really different than their local stories. If they're not from this town and they have towns where there's turmoil and lawsuits going on and everything, then you tell them about Chelmsford, where we have the entire political spectrum here in a national sense. Yes. And yet when it comes down to town issues, everybody pulls together and we get it done. Yeah, we'll disagree, we'll argue it out, and then we'll go have a beer. Right. So it's just, that's the kind of town that really stays on top of everything, and it's a good place to live. The schools, the police department, the fire department, the public services here, it's I sound like a real Chelmsford zealot. I probably am, because you put in the time and you see hundreds of other people doing the same thing. It's terrific.
Now, we're going to go through a couple of these contested races, but just so for those of you at home who perhaps might not have voted, or you voted really early and you've forgotten, we had a contested race for the Board of Selectmen. One-time incumbent running for re-election to return to the board, Pat Wojcik, Albert Diggs, Glenn Diggs, first-time candidate, and Sandy Martinez, a long-time supporter here in the town. She's been very active. Those three. On the school committee side, as Glenn just mentioned, we had two people running for the two open seats, John Moses and Barbara Scar. Barbara Scar running for re-election. On the planning board, a couple of incumbents whose names are familiar to many of you, Henry Parley Jr. and Edmund Rue, and also for a two-year term, George Zaharoulis, who's also been on the board for a long time. Board of Health, one candidate for the seat, Eric Kaplan. Board of Trustees was a contested race. We had Lisa Daigle and David Breslow running for re-election, and then a newcomer, Jillian Kenny, who has a background in library science and has been at the library a lot, so that's an interesting race. We'll get to that. Cemetery Commission, one running for that, Gerald Hardy. Constable is an interesting race, and we'll talk about that briefly. We had 4 people running for constable. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are saying, constable, what's up with that? But many of you know that it was opened up due to the death last November, I think, of long time friend to many here in town, Bill Spence, who had been constable, I think, for something like 50 years.
Long time.
50 years. And so that opened up that seat. Housing Authority, one person, and then the usual town meeting reps for each of the 9 precincts that we have here in town.
That's been a very interesting situation for the town meeting reps, because there have been many open seats.
Yes.
And you just generally don't see that. Right. And I don't know whether it's because of the turmoil in national elections that frightens people away from becoming a town meeting rep. I don't know why it would. But there were so many write-in campaigns I couldn't even keep track of it. I had at least 6 people call me in Precinct 5 to write their name in. I can't write in 6, so I could only write in 3 in Precinct 5, so I had to pick 3.
Right, and that I'm in Precinct 5 also. That was kind of stark to me that only 3 people were running. Just so you understand, there are 168 town meeting reps, 18 for each of the precincts. They're elected to staggered 6 at a time to staggered 3-year terms. And so the premise is that you get 6 people to run each year, and as you say, there were a lot of holes. So the write-in mill was working overtime?
Very busy, and it doesn't take that many write-in votes. I don't know whether you can get away with just getting 1, but I'm sure that if somebody got 10 or 20 write-in votes, they'd probably have a pretty good chance of being a town meeting rep. Now, we had talked a little bit about town meeting reps before this show started. And it is a very important position, because a town meeting really decides, where the budget's going to be spent, what the priorities of the town are. The selectmen and other officers, they generally promote particular issues, but it's really a town meeting where things are decided. So it becomes very important that the town meeting reps, do the homework, read the brochures that come out from the Finance Committee on what's going on, and bring their best game to town meeting. And I know some of the people who wanted a write-in vote will do just that, because they're anxious to become town meeting reps and get into the action.
Right.
So I think that's great. So now maybe next year we won't have these openings take place.
Now I need to set the stage for you. We're actually here at the McCarthy Middle School, where all of the precincts now come to vote, pretty much, and so that means that, unlike days gone by when we had to have people run in from points far afield, Vinyl Square and where have you.
I was one of those runners many times.
We expect to be able to bring you the results pretty quickly. And in fact, we already have Precinct 1 results.
Right.
are already in. You can see them there on your screen. Pat Wojcik eking out a victory, Glenn Diggs in 2nd place, and Sandy Martinez a fairly distant 3rd. So let's talk about these 3 candidates as we wait for the other precincts to report, Glenn. The 3 very different candidates here.
Very much so. But the interesting thing is all 3 candidates have some level of name recognition. So these names aren't ones that nobody's ever seen. Pat Wojcik had been on the Board of Selectmen, well-known name in the town, been here for many years. Her brother Charlie is in the constable race. And so Wojcik is a very common, especially in Precinct 5, our precinct. So we know that. And Glenn Diggs' wife had been involved with the schools for many years, and so a lot of people knew Valerie Diggs in the schools, and Glenn came out and has been around to many meetings over the past year or so. So we see him around town a lot, and the name becomes more well known. And Sandy Martinez has run for statewide office,
right.
state senator,
right,
and did extremely well in Chelmsford. In fact, I think she carried Chelmsford every time she ran. I may be incorrect in that, but the ones I remember she carried.
Right. And I think Sandy Martinez is well known. She's been active in, is it Chelmsford Women of Today?
I'm not sure about that, but state Republican politics she's been involved in quite a bit.
And so she has been nibbling around the edges. I was trying to remember whether she had run for selectman before, and I don't think she has.
So.
So
that I would remember.
Her first time for that. Glenn Diggs, you alluded to it. To be a little bit more specific, his wife Valerie had been librarian at the high school, I guess, and was one of the casualties of some of the troubles that the schools went through a couple of years ago, where they came up short on their budget unexpectedly, very unexpectedly, abruptly, and Frank Tiano, at that time the superintendent, decided to lay off a few folks, and she was one of them. And he has said, Glenn has said that was at that moment that he really decided to get involved a little bit more. And so he certainly did that, diving in head first, and running for office, running for the top office in town.
And the interesting thing is he didn't run for school committee. So it wasn't an issue of him running for an office that had any relationship to the event that went on. He just wanted to find a way to serve the town. And in talking with Glenn, I find him to be a very, very sharp guy. He's got a lot of ideas about the town and how to improve some of the vacancy rates that we are beginning to develop in town, look at them. So, all three candidates had good messaging about what to do to strengthen the town, which is no surprise, because that's generally the case with the Board of Selectmen. The question is which messages through the debates, the Democratic debate, Republican debate, actually got to people that were watching. And they're going to make decisions on the person and the issues a person supports, and when it comes down to vote. And the voting, again, because it's very low, I suspect that unless you're just a habitual voter like I am, that the people that came out to vote had a reason to be here, and they heard something they liked and wanted to vote that way.
And yet there was there were some common themes that we heard throughout the debates, and of course these days there are quite a few debates for these
Right.
races. Maybe it's a good thing that there weren't more contested races, because we'd have lost track of all the players. But for example, the development of Route 129.
That's a big one.
For those who might have missed it, we've had two large companies, Kronos and Mercury Computers, and I think Comcast had left some time ago. That's what I heard.
They're still there, but I think they're in a smaller size.
But
Kronos is the big one in that location.
Right.
And
Kronos having moved
Mercury
to Cross
a little
Point.
bit further down. Yeah.
They're moving. Mercury's moving to Andover, and that's all emptying of buildings. It suggests perhaps that the business climate here is weak, and the three candidates really address that a lot.
It's funny because I looked at it a little bit differently. That not that the business climate was weak, but for these particular companies, the business climate changed. I think Mercury is getting a little bit smaller, but Kronos is getting bigger. So they, one had to go to a slightly smaller facility up in Andover, and then Kronos was looking for a much larger facility, which they found in Lowell at the towers.
Yeah, I actually know someone at Mercury that they had leased that property, and the lease was due coming up. So
and that would be an influence too.
That would be an influence.
So they weren't pushed out because of serious business issues, but we do have to fill those spaces because that has a lot to do with our tax revenues.
Right. And so you can see on your screen now that as we've been talking, the results have been just pouring in. We now have the first 6 precincts complete in terms of the tally, and you can see that the vote is staying pretty much as you saw for precinct 1, with Pat Wojcik in the number 1 spot, Glenn Diggs not far behind, and Sandy Martinez running a fairly distant third at this point. Did you have a sense that because Glenn Diggs was a newcomer to this race, that maybe Sandy would have done better than she appears to be doing?
No, it was really hard to call. But Glenn has been, over the past year, like I said, at many, many meetings. So he's been seen, he's contributed to some of these meetings, so he became more well-known to people that are paying attention to the town politics as being involved a lot over the past year, and sometimes that matters. If you're out doing things and you've seen a lot and you're contributing to whether a school committee meeting or a planning board meeting or a selectmen's meeting, and you're there talking and just being present and catching up to what's going on, people notice that.
Now, you're seeing here also the results for the most contested race
Right.
in town, that for town constable. And the constable is responsible.
What precinct do we read there?
That's collective. That's
all of
That's
them.
the first
Okay.
six.
First six added up
all together.
See, now, so you would almost think that you're looking at one or two precincts,
right?
Because
From a
there's so
normal
few
election.
votes, right?
Yes, that's right. But this is the sum of all those six, and Charlie Wojcik seems to have a pretty
That
good
is
lead.
a substantial lead after 6 precincts.
And I have to say, you know, this was one of those campaigns that maybe not a lot of people were paying attention to. But I have to say that William Harvey, who's an attorney, had a tremendous lawn sign presence.
Huge signs, if I can use the word huge.
Huge,
Right.
In any case, so we're going to move now, segue over to the Library Board of Trustees. And you can see there that incumbent Lisa Daigle is
Now this is interesting.
very, very high. And Jillian Kenny, who is new but has a background in library science, is seems to be a little bit ahead of incumbent David Braslaw. So.
And for the number of votes, that's quite a few votes lead with only 3 precincts remaining.
That's
so
right.
That's an
And
interesting.
don't take anything of those check marks that you see. Those are sort of the interim leaders that that's how we're indicating.
So we're not calling the election.
We are not. We are not. With 2/3 of the precincts reporting, we can what it is what it is. The library trustee is the kind of office, it's elected office, board of trustees there, that has been a quieter kind of position in recent years, but we can remember when the library was a hot button issue
Hot
here
topic.
in town.
Yeah, we were going to build a really, really large library, and the town didn't have the stomach for that financially. So it was, and I have to use the word downsized carefully because it's still a beautiful building and it's big. I use a library a lot. I grew up in a library just about in Arlington. And the library here is fantastic, so I'm there quite frequently, and it ended up being right size for Chelmsford.
Yes, and if anything, it could use a little bit bigger parking lot, but maybe there's a plan for that because with the Pink House now gone, there's space to
So
grow.
how about a double-decker parking garage right out in front? No.
Well, and you know, with those hydraulic lifts that raise your car. Yeah. So we're looking forward to the last 3 the precincts to report in. This is going to be drawing to a pretty quick conclusion, and we hope to get some of the candidates involved to come and speak to us and give a sense of where the election came and went from their perspective. You know, you mentioned the fact that things change. I have to say that because the Board of Selectmen has only 5 people on it, because you're losing 2 incumbents,
Right.
and it looks like Pat Wojcik will return, so she's a quasi-incumbent. But the character of the board is going to change, I think.
It'll be a little different, and I know Glenn Diggs is a fairly detailed person. Pat's been there, so she's not going to have to ask questions about how things happen or run on the board. And speaking of Pat, somebody has gone out and grabbed her from the halls.
Right.
Yeah. She's going to join us here. And so, you know, there's one person that's going to be learning a little bit about how the board operates on a day-to-day basis, and Pat already knows that.
Yes.
You know, so there'll be two different approaches to that new seat.
Yes. So we're going to widen out here and welcome Pat Wojcik. Hello, welcome.
Hi, Pat.
Hello.
You've got a smile on your face. Things are going pretty well so far.
I think so. Things are looking pretty good right now. Yeah.
Are you? Is this kind of what you expected, or are you surprised by the count so far?
I haven't looked at them in detail yet, so.
Here's a hint. You took precinct 5.
Oh, I did see that, and I was very glad
We're
to
all
see
for
that.
Precinct 5, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, quite honestly, last year when I saw the results at Precinct 5, that's kind of when I knew that it didn't look good for me. But this year, looking at Precinct 5, it looks very good. So, you know, I'm happy. I'm satisfied with what I've seen so far, and hopefully the remaining results will will bear out what we've seen so far.
Have you spoken to Charlie yet to see how he's feeling about now?
I did call him just a few minutes ago to tell him to come on over, and he was surprised to hear that he's doing well.
You should be watching.
He
He should
shouldn't be too surprised.
Well, that's he didn't have any signs or anything like that. And
Oh, yes, he did. I saw Wojciech signs all over town.
don't tell him that.
And Pat, as we're speaking to you, I just want to remind our viewers that you're seeing the individual precincts clicking through there, and you seem to have pretty much taken, as we're seeing them, all the precincts. You're the top vote getter. So that's
Well, see, there's one that Glenn has.
oh,
precinct
that's
6.
true. That's true. Precinct
Yeah,
6. Sorry.
I mean, yeah.
But there's the total, look at
Oh.
how close that is.
Okay.
With 6 precincts.
Right.
Okay, well, a little bit ahead of Glenn, yeah.
And so, do you expect it to be a relatively smooth transition? Right, you have your seat picked out yet on the?
I don't have my seat picked out yet. We'll work on that Thursday night, I think, when we have our reorganization meeting. Again, if these numbers hold, and I'm hoping that they do.
I think the margin is significant with 6 precincts in, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah.
so, what was it like being in these multiple debates with 3 people? From what I saw of them, there was a lot of similarity in your views, nuanced differences. You struck me as sort of like the voice of reason, kind of in between on some issues.
Well, thank you.
What was it like from your side of the table, having to participate in all those debates?
Well, I've mentioned this before, that I think that we need to reduce the number of debates, and I'm going to see if that's one of the things that I can work on. When you're in the middle of it, it almost doesn't seem fair to be doing that, but I think we should try to consolidate some of them and maybe have a different format, as I've mentioned before. Have an opportunity for somebody to give, maybe not a stump speech, but give a 5-minute response to what they consider to be the issues of the town and of the time. But yeah, I mean, as far as the other 2 candidates, I thought they did fine. They had reasonable responses, and it did bring out some differences between us. That there were a lot of similarities, as you said, but there were a few issues where we did differ. And hopefully people did see that I did have some experience, and I missed being on the board. That's why I ran again. Quite frankly, I missed working with my colleagues. And missed, talking to just residents about how to improve the town, and then, moving forward to talking to the different departments and getting that stuff done. So I'm looking forward to being able to do that again.
So what do you think are the top issues that will be facing the board and the town as you resume your seat?
Well, one that we talked about at every debate was the 129 corridor. I mean, we need to do something there, and I think now is the time. We've tried many times over decades now to see what we can do to bring more commercial industry basically to that area, whether it be office space or biotech or the amenities that we're talking about, having restaurants and a nail salon or a hair salon there or whatever it might be, and I think now's the time to do that.
So we have economic development. I don't know whether it's a really active committee right now, because I don't
Yes.
see much going on. Maybe they're active and we just don't see it. But
Right.
Are we going to try and amp that up and get more activity in that area for economic development?
I think we should. I think there's a few committees where that's kind of been the case, where they've not sat back, but maybe we need to refresh those committees. Maybe see if the people that are on those committees are willing to make that commitment to move forward, and it can take some work.
Sure.
It's not people aren't going to come to us. Sometimes you have to go and do that outreach and work with the state to get your name out there. So if somebody is, if there's another GE somewhere that's looking to come somewhere, well, maybe, obviously not a GE to that level, but a smaller, company like that, the kind of industry, like I said, that we want in town.
There may be some energetic people that want to get involved in working on an economic development committee like that.
Sure.
So that might be fun too. And just studying what the impact of businesses leaving and businesses coming in might be for the town.
Right.
That could be very interesting study. I think people want to hear that because why? Because it's going to affect their taxes.
That's right. That's right. It is, and the more of that type of industry that we can bring in, obviously a vacant building isn't going to help us at all. no matter how nice it might look.
And
Now-
what do you think? I'm sorry, Kelly. What do you think about the building heights issue? Is it?
Yeah, I was just going to ask that same question. I heard it raised in the debates that some of those buildings along 129 are single story, they're old,
Right,
they look worn down, they could be replaced with, more modern structures that were taller, among other things, and contain therefore larger companies. Do you see that happening? I mean, we have a height limit here.
We do have the height limit. I mean, if it's a single-story building, then obviously there is some room to grow. I mean, I don't think I would want to see an 8 or a 10-story building in that area, but
Maybe 4.
maybe 4. I mean,
Something
4
that's
is
not obnoxious.
Right, 4 is not obnoxious, and I think some of the Kronos buildings were probably 4. I don't know exactly.
And there's the building right there on Alpha Road is, I think, a 4-story building.
So it wouldn't be out of place.
No. So I also heard it said during the debates that maybe there aren't the amenities right there, but the town center is just, if somebody wanted to leave their company cafeteria and go find some place to eat, they could. I think a part of that sales package is the making sure that the town is rejuvenated at the level that we want it to be. There's a master plan. There's money that we're waiting for.
That's right.
And
waiting
yes.
for. And I'm wondering I remember you mentioning that during the debates, working hard to get that money freed up so that we can
Right.
renovate. Where's that stand?
Well, it still is held up, and I think we need to get our legislative delegation working harder on that. We need to appeal to the agencies in Boston. The governor. The lieutenant governor seems to be taking a lead in these compacts with the towns. I mean, maybe that should be part of our compact. Chelmsford's compact is to work with the state to see how we can get at least increments of that $5 million released, so we can do some of that revitalization in the center. That is going to help. And then, as far as connecting to 129, some people really don't like to get in their cars to drive, but maybe if we had nicer sidewalks for one thing, or have some kind of place that they could ride a bike from that area, or the businesses in the center could open a satellite location there.
I could see a row of canteen trucks,
Well, maybe even that too. I mean, it works in Boston, right?
Absolutely.
Food trucks. Is there something in the zoning that prevents a restaurant from locating out in that area if
Yes.
there were space?
I believe there is something in
Okay,
zoning
so that's
that does.
something we might want to take a look at. 'Cause
Exactly.
If people could walk maybe a short distance to a restaurant, it might be great.
That's right.
So you mentioned that the board is going to reform on Thursday night. Do
Correct.
you imagine yourself becoming appointed to one of the offices?
I'd rather not say right now. I
Okay.
really don't know. I mean,
This
that's
is-
something that's going to be discussed over the next day and a half.
This will be the backroom negotiations
That's right,
that we
something
hear so
like
much
that.
about.
Exactly.
Well, as it appears now, Pat, looks like you're back on your way to the board, and we're
thank
glad to
you.
have you back. And thanks for stopping by on
Congratulations.
this cold night and giving us your points of view.
Okay, thank you.
We'll see you later.
All right.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Yeah, you have to leave the mic. That's it. Yeah, you do. You can't take it with you. So we're waiting for the last two precincts to report.
From the seniors, they from the seniors? No,
I
wait a
think-
minute, they're local here. No, 7 and 8 are in the building.
But they're at the. I think they're at the
the other
other
part.
end somehow.
Could be as much as 100 feet away.
I was going to say it is quite a ways to get back. But again, this is so much faster than we've had in past
I'm
years.
enjoying it.
It does reduce the suspense very quickly, and so we're waiting for those last two precincts. And against this backdrop of the election, in the not distant future, we're going to have also our Springtown meeting, where among other things we'll see the budget unveiled for the coming fiscal year.
That's right.
And
All the town meeting reps are going to have to do a little homework before they show up.
Right.
Just to be sure.
Right. So we're going to turn the table, so to speak, now to Glenn Diggs, who is with us. Congratulations. It looks like you're about to
I'll reach across Kelly here.
accede to the Board of Selectmen. Your first time running for office.
Yes.
How was the experience for you?
I say it was exciting. I got to meet a lot of terrific people, got to see a lot of committee people that were not in the limelight, but really helped to make the town work by volunteerism, and it was really an absolutely exciting trip.
Now, when was the moment that you said, you know, I think the Board of Selectmen is something I'd like to set my sights on?
When my wife said, you should get out of the house more.
There's a clue there somewhere.
I have to say, being on the Board of Selectmen, her wish is fulfilled, I think.
Well, what I'm finding is that you can go to meetings virtually every night of the week, and in some cases they're on the same night that the Board of Selectmen meet. But the more that you can garner from those meetings, the better you are, and the better that it makes the town. That everybody has a say, everybody has a viewpoint. I think that the goal is to have everyone working in the same direction. I think the town has been fortunate in that we have a strong leadership from the town manager, that we've been able to balance our budget well. But every year we get hit with new mandates, sort of funded by the state, not quite. We have still high insurance rates that we have to meet, just like individuals do. And sooner or later that will catch up to us. And it's important to start now in planning for those rainy days ahead.
I made the comment earlier, Glenn, that you had been to a lot of meetings over the past many months. Saw you at selectmen's meetings, school committee meetings, finance committee meetings. So the fact that you were there, at least absorbing the information that was crossing the table in the particular meetings, probably some people caught that. And when you have a low turnout election like this, people, other than the habitual voters like myself, they show up because they want to put the person in office that they think is going to do the job. Otherwise, they'd stay home, because there's not many contested races right now, except for write-ins in some of the precincts here. And I think that stood you well when people were looking at how am I going to cast a vote. They saw you at the meetings, and they saw you participating in some of the meetings.
Well, I hope that it spurs more people to run. I'm a first-time candidate, and I was successful. I would hope there are other people in town, bright people with different expertise, that come to the forefront and run for office. I think that the town is blessed with a lot of great talent.
Absolutely,
some people, may sit back and look like, this is kind of daunting, and can I really do this? And I encourage them to step up to the plate. They know what they're doing. They will find people who are already doing it to help them through the process. And I think that the town can be only made better by more participation. And I think it will happen.
Now, during the campaign, you were stressing your business experience, and the implication is there that you by being on the board, you can help the town with its economic development. We were talking to Pat Wojcik just a moment ago. She sees the 129 corridor as being a big item on the plate going forward. Do you agree? And do you have some sense of what the solutions might be?
I agree with her in terms of the 129 corridor being an important cog in the finances of the town going forward. I think based on the debates, and things change obviously over time, that my feeling is that the town should not rush into putting together an overview plan. I think that you need to sit back and really study it. There are other towns that have done exactly what I believe, and others may believe, that Chelmsford should go through, kind of a metamorphosis in terms of how we go about treating our businesses, our major businesses. And other towns have been very successful in growing that segment of their income. And we need to kind of look at what was their successes and engage everyone in the town. Everyone needs to have a stake in this, not just
you can access a lot of the business infrastructure through the Chelmsford Business Association. They're well populated with businesses in town, primarily because of the possibility of tax classification years ago. But still, as a group, there's a lot of conversation that goes on between them about what works for their companies and what might work for a new company, big companies and small companies. And we have an economic development committee, sort of, that seem to be a little bit low-key at Town Hall. As I said to Pat, that might be worth amping up a little bit and maybe bringing some new people on to do kind of what you said, study it and see what it looks like to the logical analysis.
Right. There was a plan put together in 2010 And if you read it, it's about 61 pages long. It encompassed many things. It was not only about economic development. It was
very-
about housing.
very
It was
broad.
about
Right.
all kinds of issues, preservation. All kind of things were in there. And on the second or third page, there was a line that said that the town should not pursue economic development for the sake of revenue, basically. Which, after I read that, I said, what the heck is this thing about if it's not about finding revenue? So I think some of that can be used, some of that previous study can be used to create a framework around where we're going to go, but really needs to be done in the right way, and rushing it is probably not the way to do it. We're going to have one opportunity to do it, let's do it right.
There was some discussion that this notion of an overlay district for that stretch of town might come up at the fall town meeting. Now that you're on the board, do you see that as being a greater possibility?
I think that at this point, I would say that's rushing it. I think there are a lot of stakeholders in town that need to be listened to in doing that. It's an important change for the town. I mean, we were always X. We want X to continue with a small change in a particular section. And I think everyone needs to be brought in so that everyone can understand it and everyone supports it. Just like I say that the boards are all going in one direction, I think the town needs to go in one direction.
You may not get everyone supporting it, but at least most of the people.
Right.
One of the big changes in town has been a lot of the apartment buildings and 40B projects that have come in. It has changed the character of certain parts of the town. Precinct 5, for example, on 110, a lot of buildings there. And while we do have a cluster of businesses down on 129, you don't want it to start looking like Wang Towers 2. That would be not in keeping with Chelmsford. So, there may be some thought with this committee about perhaps encouraging 4-story buildings, nothing tremendously high, but more space for businesses, and perhaps changing the zoning, as Pat said a little bit earlier, about allowing restaurants to get some space in there so people can actually have some place to go at lunchtime.
Well, that's part of what differentiates me from Pat and from Sandy, who I ran against. And we brought it up at the debates. I'm not opposed to big buildings down at the end of 129 leading to Route 3. I think that the buildings and the businesses come first. The people, if you bring people in, restaurants, dry cleaners, whatever you want, dentists, whatever, will go there on their own because there's people.
If it's zoned, to be
if
able
it's
to
zoned
take-
appropriately.
right.
Bringing those amenities in is not going to draw the businesses.
No, you're
the
correct.
businesses will draw the amenities.
I agree with that.
So, anyway, I appreciate your time.
It's been great having you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Glenn, and
Great.
we'll see you often.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much.
Watch your microphone
Yep.
there. You got to.
So we're still awaiting the results from precincts 7 and 8.
7 and 8. We should send a runner over there.
I don't quite
Did
know.
Did they lose power on 7 and 8?
That might be it. Might be it. It's. All right. So I have good reason to believe that we're going to have results very, very quickly
okay.
from that, and it will bring to finality these totals. And I need to remind everybody that what you're seeing here is these are unofficial totals. Copied by hand off of sheets of paper into our computer system, so we'll have. But the margins are sufficiently large that I think
It's fairly clear.
It's fairly clear, and as we were mentioning at the top of the program, the selectmen's race was a contested race, and probably least likely to be contested, except for the untimely death of Bill Spence, was the constable race, and it appears that the winner of that will be Charlie Wojcicki, and
Yes, indeed.
as luck would have
And
it,
guess who
Charlie
showed up?
Charlie is here.
Congratulations,
Welcome,
Charlie.
Thank you guys
congratulations.
very much.
You're welcome.
What prompted you to run for this?
I just like Bill Spence so much. I figured I'd do something that he did because he seemed to enjoy it, and I really like his daughter Sandy. Talked to Sandy at length about it and figured out what
So
it was
you
about.
knew what you were getting into, Charlie,
Yeah,
right?
I knew a little bit about it.
Yeah.
So
Were you surprised that it attracted 4 candidates?
no, I thought there'd be like 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm amazed, and I'm just amazed that I won too, because there were 4 candidates. There's 4 good people running.
Yeah.
So as I promised your sister I wouldn't mention, it's all the Wojus signs around town that got people aware that you were running for
It
constable,
probably
right?
was. It probably was my sister's dime, and I went on my sister's
I thought
dime.
that was great strategy on your part.
Hey, farmers know what they're doing. They
So,
grew
so
up.
tell us. All right. So I know you've done some research here. I think a lot of people really don't know what the constable does. So inform
Delivers a
us.
lot of papers, and I was told mostly for Arena. You work in the town, you deliver papers in the town for Arena mostly.
So if the constable's coming up to our door, is that a good or bad thing?
It's probably a bad thing.
Okay.
So you better run.
So I have to say, we're seeing now. We have all 9 of the precincts reporting.
There's
and,
the constable's race, and that's pretty clear.
pretty
That's-
clear.
that's
You
a
almost cracked
significant
that
margin.
1,000 vote mark. It was a light turnout day, but it's a pretty clear victory for you. And I think we're going to be. It's going to be great to see you around more often. And it looks like your sister Pat won the
Pat won
bragging
also.
rights.
Pat won
It
bragging.
was close.
Hey, 21 votes.
But it's going to be great having you around in official capacity again. And
Well, yeah, thank you very much.
I look forward to seeing you running around with a sheaf of papers in your hand.
Charlie, do you get
That's what I'll
do you get one
be.
of those badges that you get to wear around town?
I was told I do, but I don't expect one. I thought it was like a policeman's
And you wouldn't
badge.
wear one anyway.
I wouldn't wear a
I know
badge,
you,
no.
Charlie. Yeah.
I
In my
hear-
pocket only.
I hear that he's lobbying to be at town meeting, going, hear ye, the Honorable
The
John
town
Curlin
crier.
is.
That may be a new
Town
job
crier.
I
for the
can get that
constable.
job. Right.
Anyway, thank you very much for
Well,
joining
congratulations,
us.
Charlie.
And congratulations
I'd like to
again.
just thank all the voters from town who voted me in.
Well, in an election with a low turnout, people come to vote for people they want in office. So there weren't a lot of money issues and stuff like that. So the people that got votes today, the people had to show up here to make that vote. And so I think that's a vote of confidence too, Charlie.
All right, great to see you.
Bye, you guys.
And we have all 9 precincts reporting. As you see there, it's getting to that point where we know who the winners and losers are, and it's the nature of
Yeah, it is a
contested races
selectmen's race.
that not everybody can win, but it's as
Being
you,
that close, though, that's very interesting. The vote is that close.
yes, and so
And somebody new on the library trustees.
right,
Yep.
right, and again, we had only. Not only did we have a low voter turnout, as you're seeing here reflected in these numbers, but we also, you might have seen going by a few minutes ago, the individual town meeting rep totals, and
I missed that.
I
I was looking at our guests.
Some of the precincts have the full complement of 6, and some, like we were mentioning Precinct 5, had only 3 people running in. So what happens in that situation? Are there sufficient write-in candidates? People see that there aren't enough people on the ballot to fill all of those seats, or do some go unfilled? Because you're a
I
town meeting
think
rep,
there were enough calls going around for write-in candidates. I have a feeling that
on
all the
Precinct
seats
2,
will
only
be filled.
3 people
Right.
running.
But they're going to be write-in candidates there, and so I think that on the precincts that have write-in candidates, there was enough chatter going around town of why are these seats empty? You should run, or somebody's wife should run, and so there's a lot of chatter about we've got to fill those town meeting seats with people that we know are going to do their homework, that are going to show up for the meetings, and I have a feeling that there'll be quite a few write-in votes in Precinct 5, certainly our precinct. Precinct 4 had write-ins. In fact, I'm trying to remember if there was a precinct that didn't have write-ins. I'm not sure.
Oh, there was at least one that had. There's one right there. with
Six looks full,
seven,
right.
7 people
6 looks
running for
full.
the 6
Yep.
seats. So it is the nature of our government. I moved into Chelmsford in 1985, right at the tail end of open meeting.
Yes.
Open town meeting.
Yep.
I don't want to go back there. I firmly
I
believe
remember
in
that well.
I
remember
believe in
that
the
well.
power of representative town meeting, and
Bring in 100 people, vote, and they all leave. And nobody's there.
And so that makes for an interesting segue, because we have town meeting coming up soon, and it's the spring town meeting, which has, as a general character, we approve the budget. We don't approve too many zoning bylaws.
No.
And I haven't seen the numbers yet for the town budget. You're a town meeting rep. Have you had an
I have
inkling of
not, no. I know that the budget is generally always very, very tight, and the town manager has had to, for a short amount of time, borrow money against free cash to get through the end of the town's year on the budget, but that money is immediately replenished with the free cash from the next year. So
And
there's-
that's been something of a bone of contention with some
yeah,
of the
a little
selectmen,
bit.
yes?
But it's if you do the math, if you know anything about budgeting, it's not as if the money doesn't exist. It's expected and historically has been more than sufficient to cover the small amount that the town manager is holding over as essentially borrowed money against the budget. So it's a reasonable financial practice. It's not like we're trying to print money that we don't have. The money is there, it just hasn't been recorded as free cash yet. So we'll have that discussion again, I'm sure, at town meeting about, well, how are you going to cover the budget? But I haven't seen the budget, so I don't know yet.
Right, it's a work in progress.
It might be
but
fully
the warrant
balanced.
is out, and
Yep.
the warrant articles. Do you see any hot button issues coming before town meeting?
It's no.
It looks pretty quiet.
Pretty ordinary.
I think one thing that people will
There's
see.
no overrides.
No overrides. In fact, I think right now the appetite in the town for overrides is
Zero.
zero. We saw some of that in the discussion concerning the age of the high school, for example, which is some people are talking about maybe doing some major repairs there.
Built in 74 approximately, and people think it's ancient.
A lot of homeowners
For us,
would
that's
beg to
not so
disagree.
much the case.
I do see here on the warrant that there's going to be an uptick in the number of these enterprise or revolving accounts that the town manager is bringing forward. There's been a change in the state legislation, the underlying Department of Revenue allowances, and so this is actually good. It brings a lot more transparency to some of these activities
And
that we have.
flexibility for moving the money around. So that I'm sure will be a subject of conversation at town meeting. How are you going to use these? Are there going to be caps on them? How much money moves through? So again, if you're paying attention, and when the budget comes out we see it in more detail, if you're paying attention, these are good discussions to have, because most people, we can't run our homes on revolving accounts quite like that, but the town needs to do that. And municipal budgeting is quite different from home budgeting, but the underlying principles are the same. You can't spend money you don't have.
Right. Now, often we have at this annual town election a contested race for school committee. That didn't happen this year. We have an incumbent, Barbara Scarr, who's going to get reelected. We have a newcomer to the political and school scene here in town, John Moses, who's going to be taking a position. And as you alluded at the top of the broadcast here, your wife Evelyn Thorne is stepping down after 18 years.
18 years, and you don't really realize what goes on for 18 years until you do the math, which you and I both would do, of course. 18 years translates into over 2,000 meetings.
Yeah.
And if you say to anybody, would you like to go to 2,000 meetings over the next 18 years? They'll say no. Right. But between the school committee meetings and PTO meetings and joint meetings and administrative meetings and the other kinds of meetings, 2,000 meetings in 18 years. That's a lot.
And as much as the school committee accomplishes, because it's a very difficult position anyway, over the last year or so, those folks have come under even greater scrutiny.
Been much more difficult.
And their jobs haven't gotten any easier. So hats off to them, to John Moses and Barbara Scarr for stepping up, and hats off to Evelyn for her many, many years of service. Yeah. And
John Moses is from Precinct 5.
Well, there you go. We're gonna rule, but you'll never get me to run for anything. I'm sorry.
But you can moderate.
I can moderate. That would work. Anyway, we'll look forward to seeing you all at town meeting, which is coming up in the not too distant future. I want to thank Glenn Thorne for his excellent commentary.
Thank you for the invitation.
We'll have to make it harder next time. This was pretty easy.
We'll see if we can fill all those town meeting seats next spring.
Absolutely.
To make sure everybody's running, and perhaps there'll be a few contested elections. You might even find some candidates rerunning for a seat they held in the past.
Oh, I see. Well, we'll find out about that and much more when you join us again next year at the same time.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Glenn. And thank you all for watching us. It's been our pleasure to bring you these live election results from the McCarthy Middle School. Want to tip our hat to the volunteers of Chelmsford Telemedia and the staff who've put this together. This is a really nice place to be able to bring you this reportage. Much, much better than sitting on a stool in the corner of town offices, let me tell you. So until town meeting, when we will rejoin you, I'm going to toss it back to our studio, and thank you for joining Kelly Beatty, Glenn Thorne.
Good night, Chelmsford. Yep.
Good night.